They say that life is a gift, but what if that gift comes with a heavy price? What if every single day feels like an uphill climb, a constant struggle just to be? Today, as we honor Suicide Prevention Month, we're going to pull back the curtains on a hidden reality, a silent war being waged inside the bodies and minds of millions. These are the soldiers you don't see, the ones fighting for every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of peace. If you ever felt like your body was failing you, or if you ever worried about someone who feels that way, then this episode is for you. Welcome to the Brew.
You are now tuned into the Brew podcast with Mr. Cool Beans, sharing stories, inspiring others.
Welcome back to another episode of the Brew podcast. If this is your first time here, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Mr. Cool Beans. I am a kidney health advocate and coach. I am also a kidney patient. My battle with CKD has been ongoing now for about 1.5 years, coming up on 2 years. And boy, can I tell you that I have gained so much knowledge and experience throughout this whole process. I always tell people that throughout this fighting of CKD, I've actually learned what it means to be a human being. I've navigated so many different emotions. I've seen a lot. I've endured a lot just in such a small span of time. And so I believe also, with that being said, there's so much to talk about on this episode as well. So as we begin, I think I'd like to kick off this episode with a monologue. If you don't know what a monologue is, I suggest you get into some theater, go watch Broadway or something like that, because monologues are super dope. They give you a good insight on the raw emotions of what somebody might be going through. So let's go ahead and kick off with a monologue. I am a medical miracle, or maybe a disaster. It depends on the day. They told me it was just a small stage 1 cancer cell, an uninvited guest hiding in my kidney. We'll just take a piece of it, they said. A partial nephrectomy. Sounds so simple, doesn't it? Like you're just trimming the hedge. But then came the twist, the kind of plot twist that makes you question the writer of your life. My left kidney decided it had enough drama and ruptured. It just burst. One moment I'm recovering, feeling sore but hopeful. The next, a searing pain, a panic, and a rush back to the hospital. They fixed it. I'm here. I have a stent now, a tiny metallic cage that keeps everything where it's supposed to be. I call it my little roommate. It's always there, a constant reminder of everything that happened, and of what could happen. I can feel it sometimes, a little twinge, a dull ache, and a ghost in the machine. It's a strange feeling, knowing that there's a piece of me that isn't really me, but is keeping me alive. The doctors say I'm lucky, stage 4 CKD, but you're stable, they say with a smile. It's a weird kind of luck. It's like winning the lottery, but the prize is a new full-time job managing a failing organ. Every day is a mental checklist, fluids, diets, meds, and a physical checklist. The fatigue, the brain fog, the aches. I look in the mirror, and I see the same person, but I feel different. My body has been through war. It's a veteran with scars you can't see. In my mind, it's a constant battleground of what ifs and what nows. The cancer is gone, but the fear isn't. The ruptured kidney is mended, but the fragility remains. The thing they don't tell you is how loud the silence is. The silence after your doctor says your kidney function is declining. The silence in the middle of the night when you can't sleep because the pain won't let you and the insomnia is ringing. The silence when you're supposed to be celebrating being cancer-free, but all you can think about is the ticking clock of your kidney. My GFR, my glomerular filtration rate, is hovering between 24 and 30. It's the number that tells me how well my kidneys are working. For a transplant, they want you at 20 or lower. I've done everything they've asked. I have had the echocardiogram, the hepatitis A and B shots, all the blood work. I even have a living donor, a beautiful soul who went through all the testing and was approved by the transplant board. We're ready to go, but still, it's a waiting game. I'm too healthy to be considered sick enough, so I walk this little tightrope, trying to stay well enough to live, but not so well that I can't get the help that I desperately need. It's an agonizing position. So yeah, I'm a medical miracle. I'm a survivor. I'm also just a person sitting here, trying to figure out how to live a full life when a part of me is literally held together by a metal tube. But I'm here, and for now, that's enough. Yeah, that's enough indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, the monologue that I just read was a chronicalization of my CKD journey thus far. And it might seem very similar to a lot of folks who battle CKD journey or are fighting a specific chronic illness. While I've penned a lot of the twists and turns, all the ups and downs that I'm continuously enduring at this point in my journey, it doesn't even capture the mental agony of fighting this thing, this invisible illness, on a day-to-day basis. And you know what's so funny is that, September is my birth month. I was born September 28th, and it just so happened that yesterday while I was scrolling through Instagram, I saw that September was recognized as Suicide Prevention Month. While the two are not, they don't go hand in hand. They're not one and the same thing. However, though, I felt like it was appropriate for me to talk about this because it's such a lived experience for me. So I think this episode is super dedicated to anybody who has been challenged in life, who's been burdened by the thoughts of the what ifs, what would happen if, how could I ever, those just mental fist fights that you go through day to day. For those of you who are like me and had no idea of the significance for the month of September in our society, September is recognized as National Suicide Prevention Month. It's a time when mental health advocates, prevention organizations, and communities unite to raise awareness about suicide, share resources, and promote a message of hope. The entire month is dedicated to a variety of efforts, with a particular focus on raising awareness of suicide as a public health issue, reducing the stigma associated with mental health conditions and suicidal thoughts, providing support for individuals who have been impacted by suicide, and promoting resources like the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And you know what's crazy? I feel it right now. All the questions like, yo, you're Mr. Cool Beans. You're supposed to be the positive coach guy who's encouraging folks to continue to fight the good fight for health and stay positive and being encouraged. Why are you talking about suicide? What's all of this about? I can agree to a degree, but then I have to mention that I think it's important that we shed light on this phenomena because a part of the fight for chronic illness or fighting chronic illness, these things actually do come within that package as well. We can't neglect that. I've even taken it for myself. The lived experience, I was super positive, thinking, okay, we're going to get through this. But then I also myself have had some very dark times. I mentioned this on the previous episodes. I've had times where I literally saw my life, and what's crazy? I literally had this conversation with my wife the other day, and I was describing what it felt like when chronic illness or chronic kidney disease came into my life. Follow with me, stay with me for a second. Let me describe it for you. Imagine you are building a house and you buy all the materials for it. You buy the bricks, you buy the wood, you buy the furniture, you buy everything. You have the blueprint. You see how your life or how your house is going to become when every piece is put into place. And you work so hard to acquire the materials. You've done everything possible. Then all of a sudden, bam, right behind you, you get hit over the head and now you're tied up. You're tied up with heavy chains. And then you look at all the materials that you've stacked up into a house formation, your furniture's in there, and then someone comes with gasoline and lights it on fire. That's what chronic illness tends to feel like when you look at your life and everything that you've worked for and how now everything is starting to fall apart. It's like a slow burning fire. That's the biggest detail. The fire doesn't burn fast. It's a slow burning fire and there's nothing you can do about it but just watch it burn. While on the medical side of things, you have to be proactive for sure. You definitely have to go to your doctor's appointment, and that is doing something. But then when you watch the normality, when we're talking about what you considered your normal life, what you built to be your normal life, you could never go back to that life. You can never go back to what you previously considered normal because the chronic illness set in and it's slowly destroying everything again. So once that whole thing burns down, you're gonna have to establish a new normal. But then you grieve. You think about your hands and how much they worked to create that life that you set up for yourself. And now you have this illness that's attacking you, and there's nothing you can do about it. It has to run its course, and then you have to establish somewhere else now. But people want to neglect that. People want to forget about that and just focus on the positive. We have to focus on this because a lot of times when people feel like they're being, excuse my French, when people feel like they're being shut up about certain things that they're navigating through mentally, a lot of times they feel devalidated. They don't feel like anybody's really listening. And that's where it breeds ground for all those dark thoughts to kind of settle in. Trust me, it's a lived experience for folks who are fighting chronic illness. And people, trust me, I say this out of love for everyone, but I think a lot of times it's the ignorance of those who don't have chronic illness of the high risk of suicide in folks who have chronic illness, if that makes sense. And when I say ignorance, I don't mean it in a mean way. It just means that you just don't know or don't understand it fully. You might be able to sympathize or can empathize a little bit, but you don't understand it fully. Individuals with chronic illness, including CKD, face a significantly higher risk of suicide compared to the general public. While the reasons are complex and multifaceted, they often involve a combination of factors: the physical burden of the disease, constant pain, loss of independence, social isolation, and the financial stress of medical care. Now, am I saying that all of these completely align with everyone who is fighting a chronic illness? Probably not. I'm pretty sure there are some folks out there who have CKD or a chronic illness who have the proper community, so they don't experience the significant social isolation that can come from this. I know there's probably some folks out there who are well-to-do and don't struggle with the financial stress of medical care. I'm pretty sure some folks they manage their physical activity pretty well with their chronic illness, despite what stage and the progression of it all. Some people are actually doing pretty great with their chronic condition, and they live a really fulfilling life. That's great, but that's not everyone's story. Now, the teacher in me had to go and do my research before I started running my mouth on this stuff, right? So let's listen up for a little bit. So I found out that a study on patients with renal failure found a nearly 5-fold increase in the odds of suicide attempt compared to the general public. While this doesn't mean that the folks with renal failure or folks who are fighting chronic illnesses have actually made any attempt on their own life, it probably suggests that a lot of folks who are fighting chronic illnesses are probably the ones who are literally standing on the edge of life and are looking down. And I, for one, have to say that I think I found myself amongst that group at one point in time or another. Trust me, this only gets a little bit deeper. For individuals on dialysis, it says that the risk is particularly high. One study from Taiwan found that patients who had been on hemodialysis for less than 3 months had an odds ratio for suicide 20 times higher than matched controls. Early research from the US in the 1970s even suggested that the suicide rate in dialysis patients was 400 times higher than the general population. While most recent data varies, the trend of a significantly elevated risk remains consistent. Now, before I nosedive straight into the whys and what causes of the elevation in suicide attempts or suicide thoughts in folks who are fighting chronic illnesses, especially folks who have CKD or are on dialysis, whatever the case may be, I must say that there are some really great people who are making the most out of their life despite them being on dialysis or fighting CKD. I know many chronic kidney disease patients who are knuckling through life. They look at dialysis as a new lifeline, a new hope for living, the second chance to keep living, and so they make the most out of their life. And a lot of times it's not even the dialysis machine. A lot of times they rely on their family. A lot of time the biggest anchor for them is their faith in God. And so that keeps them grounded. But for a lot of people who don't have a solid foundation or have a support group or a sense of community that's supposed to keep them anchored despite their condition, these suicidal rates are often elevated because of those factors. I just want to take the time right now to give a special shout out to all of my peeps who are on dialysis, whether it's peritoneal or hemodialysis. All of this is kind of giving me and the people who are listening a good insight of what you guys navigate through mentally in times where you're just not feeling it today, when your mind kind of takes you along for a ride that you don't want to. So shout out to you guys, but let's continue. So the why. Why is it higher than the general population? Well, people on dialysis, they might contemplate suicide due to the overwhelming physical and psychological burdens of their condition. The high risk of suicide amongst dialysis patients is a well-documented issue, guys. Dialysis treatments are extremely demanding, and can lead to a significant decline in the quality of life. I mean, we're talking about the rigid schedule, typically requiring multiple sessions a week, like 3 times, sometimes 4 to 5 times a week. Severely restricted, diets. When we're talking about the person's freedom and ability to work, travel, or even engage in social activities. Physical symptoms are often severe and persistent. I mean, we're talking about fatigue. I mean, even for me as a non-dialysis patient, I have my bouts with fatigue from time to time. Fatigue is a primary complaint, making even the simplest tasks feel impossible. Patients also endure chronic pain, muscle cramps, those muscle cramps, and nausea, which contribute to the sense of exhaustion and hopelessness. Furthermore, the strict dietary and fluid restrictions can make meals a common source of enjoyment, a constant source of stress and deprivation. Take me, for example. My GFR ranges between 24 and 30 from time to time, and I'm at stage 4. Even then, when I notice that I drink too much water, I wear it on my body until my kidneys can get to it. And a lot of times it's a hard haul for my body to get to that fluid that's just sitting on my body. So I tend to put on a lot of water weight. I always say that if I was on dialysis, I would have got to my dry weight, but then we got to consider all the other complications that come with dialysis that people have to go through. So it's a crazy mental burden when you're battling CKD. So I get that part on why things kind of elevate themselves. Another thing that causes it to go up is the psychological and emotional factors. Now you got to think about it. The emotional toll of dialysis is truly profound, where many patients experience a loss of independence, feeling as though their life is no longer their own. The transition to dialysis can trigger feelings of grief for their previous life and identity. Depression is a prevalent and serious issue, affecting a large percentage of dialysis patients. This often is linked to chronic stress, physical symptoms, and the feeling of being trapped by their treatment. The fear of death, guys, I can't even stress this one out. The fear of death is as well the burden on the family members. This can also lead to feelings of hopelessness and guilt. A patient's sense of self-worth can diminish as they become more dependent on others for care. For me, it's almost like watching a movie trailer, because a lot of these things that I'm reading about, the psychological factors and the emotional factors, a lot of these things I'm already experiencing myself at stage 4. While I can do a little bit more than folks who are on dialysis, it still feels like, wait, I'm literally heading down that road. And a lot of the depression, a lot of the fear, a lot of the grief, I'm feeling it now. Trust me, that loss of independence, the grief over your previous life and identity, guys, if you know me for who I was, but before all of this happened, you knew I enjoyed my liberty. But then when this came along, it was a forced pivot switch. There's nothing I could have done about it. I grieve my previous life. This is something that I've said before, well documented. Depression for me has been monumental, in the sense that at times it's triggered by the littlest things. Sometimes I do feel trapped by my symptoms. I feel trapped by the treatment, because I'm always going to doctor's appointments. I'm going to see the specialist. I always have to set up this stent exchange, and I always have to do these follow-ups, and I do feel trapped. Sometimes it does feel hopeless. I remember one time I recently went to the beach with my family, and I saw a dolphin, like multiple dolphins, jump out the water and splash. It was so beautiful. Then I had the thought, and I told my wife, I don't want to die. So these things are so real to dialysis patients, but it's also real to me because I'm seeing it, even though I'm not on dialysis yet. And then we have this third one, which doesn't really apply to many folks who are fighting chronic illness or have CKD, but this one is the lack of support. Some folks have really great support systems, but majority of the folks, they don't tend to have a lot of great support systems, if I can be honest. A critical factor is the inadequate mental health support within the healthcare system. While dialysis centers focus on the physical aspects of treatment, the psychological needs of the patients are often overlooked. Many patients feel isolated as they struggle to find others who can truly understand their experience. This lack of communication and emotional support can lead to feelings of loneliness and despair, pushing them towards suicidal ideation. And that one hit me so hard because I can't tell you how many times where me trying to communicate how I was feeling, what was going on in my mind, what was going on in my heart, really was affecting me. And a lot of times, nobody specific, but a lot of times what you would have happen is that folks, they listen to respond, but they don't listen to hear you. They're quick to say, "You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be all right. Just hang in there. You got this. You can." But I don't necessarily want to hear that. I just need you to listen to me and sympathize. The other day I did a video call with a friend of mine, good guy, and we were talking about how certain times when you go through certain situations, not everybody's gonna understand you. They're not gonna understand you because a lot of what you go through, if they haven't walked in it, they won't begin to comprehend where you're coming from. It's almost like a hidden language. The struggle is a hidden language and only certain people know how to talk it. And when other people say, like somebody can say, "You're going to be all right." Two different people can say, "You're going to be all right." But then when one person says, "You're going to be all right," it's almost coming from somewhere deeper. And that's when you can identify like, "Oh, you know where I've been through. You know where I'm coming from." And it's so hard to find that. And it's not to say that you disqualify anybody else who's pushing encouragement. It's just that sometimes, as it says here, sometimes it's so hard to find the emotional support. It's so hard to find the folks who can really understand your experience that it can lead to those moments of loneliness and despair, which can ultimately make you feel like, I'm the only one living this, and it's such a lonely space, which makes room for, those type of thoughts that come in. And it's a scary place to be for folks who are struggling and fighting in life. Guys, this is heavy for me because as I'm looking into this, all the deets of all of this, I'm looking at myself and all I see is the check marks being clicked. And here's another statement that I can hear, "But Mr. Cool Beans, you're not even on dialysis, so it shouldn't be all that bad." No. I think when we say that, what we tend to do is neglect the mental health impact of chronic kidney disease on the patient. Like, guys, the physical symptoms of CKD they're directly linked to mental health struggles. The disease is often accompanied by high rates of depression, anxiety, and other mood disorders. Like, mood disorders out the wazoo. If anybody wants to know if it's true, ask my wife. My wife will tell me all the time, like, she feels like in some sense she lost me. I'm not the same anymore. Like, I get moody at times. It's not all the time. And guys, I don't want to make it seem like I'm Godzilla blowing dragon fire everywhere. No. That's not what it is. But like I said before, like the depression and anxiety is so heavy that it causes mood swings and make me moody at times when it's unnecessary. Because I'm constantly hyper fixated on my life. Every day I wake up since my diagnosis, there's not one day that has gone by where I don't think about my life and how long do I have left. When you're hyper fixated on that all the time, guys, that tends to wear on your thought patterns. According to a survey of over 1,000 kidney patients, 2/3, about like 67%, reported experiencing symptoms of depression. More than a quarter, 27% of those surveys said they had considered self-harm or suicide as a direct result of their disease. And a key issue is the lack of mental health support. The same survey showed that 68% of the kidney patients had not been offered any mental health support, even though majority who received it found it useful. When I was going through the transplant process and I got to the finish line of wrapping up my I guess my portfolio to present to the case, I actually sat down with a transplant psychologist and he broke it down with me. We went through the whole, gambit. We talked about who I was, where I'm from, kind of got a what do you call it? A background of who I was. And we kind of talked for a little bit. And just that 30-minute conversation with the psychologist felt so relieving. It felt like I was talking to somebody who understood me, even though he himself does not have CKD. He reached a place in me that I needed to be reached. And while I have a wife who gets me tremendously, she even admits that there are times where I go so deep into certain places, her arms are too short to reach me. And while I do have it, I actually have it on my chart where it says, mental health screening necessary, or it's overdue rather. So I got to get up on that. My wife always also tells me like I need therapy. I need therapy because of the level of trauma that I had to endure, that I went through. So, and quite honestly, I need to get up on that. I need to be more proactive on finding mental health support. Because I know for myself, there's certain things that I try to like muster and tuck into my shirt and make it seem like I'm all good, but then it comes out at another point. I can compartmentalize really good, but there are times it shows up. I'm the kind of person that wears my heart on my sleeve, and sometimes I have a lot of things underneath the sleeve of my shirt. So I can admit that I need to find some therapy, some kind of something to help me shovel through all the things that I've endured. I'll also add this. I think as a society, we kind of dumb down mental health, especially for men, because we're supposed to be stoic rather. We're supposed to be mustering life with brass knuckles and I can handle anything. But remember, we're designed to have emotions, and these emotions have to be processed. But I think that's a whole different conversation for a whole nother time, right? But let's continue. I have to talk about the importance of mental health support. This is a conversation that is constantly happening at our house. Mental health isn't separate from physical health. They're super intertwined, especially in chronic illness. Like I had to learn that. It is one and the same. You can take care of your body. You can go biking. You can go running. You can go walking. But if your med zone isn't taken care of, guys, it's gonna weigh heavy on everything else health-wise. All right. Prioritizing your mental health for someone with CKD can lead to better physical outcomes and a better quality of life. Okay. For example, you have improved adherence to treatment. Depression and anxiety can lead to a lack of motivation, making it difficult for patients to stick to strict dietary restrictions, medication schedules, and dialysis treatment. Addressing these mental health issues can improve adherence and slow disease progression. Like, can you imagine you're so depressed you don't even want to take your medicine? You're so depressed you don't even want to listen to how the doctors told you to take the meds. That's why the transplant psychologist meets up with you right before they present your case to the board to make sure you're mentally and psychologically okay. Because they want to make sure if you have to take anti-rejection meds, that you're going to take it on time so that the kidney doesn't die. So guys, it's important for you to take care of your mental health just so you can adhere to the treatment. Another reason why mental health is important to someone with CKD, because it produces a better quality of life. By providing psychological support, patients can learn coping strategies to manage the emotional burdens of the disease, leading to a more fulfilling life despite the limitations. And I think that's where I kind of try to shoot my shot in encouraging people to continue the good fight in their health. Because I know, like I said, I've learned rather what it means to be a human being, what it means to have raw emotions that need to be healed. Creating a better quality of life. On my Instagram, I always try to produce like educational stuff so that folks can read about CKD and know how to navigate the ills of it all and be on top of it. I think we need more of that. We need more folks filling those spaces. I know we have renal dietitians, we have nephrologists, we have all these great doctors and motivational. We need more patients advocating. What are they doing? Sharing ideas on how to live with this disease so that it doesn't take your mind away from you. And also, mental health helps to reduce the risk of suicide and self-harm. Do you know that screening for depression and suicidal ideation, particularly during key vulnerable periods like the start of dialysis, is essential for prevention? Like, you gotta understand that trauma can lead to a lot of negative thought patterns to be created. It can create those negative thought patterns. And like I said before, society has a good way of shunning, the talk about the mental health issues, to talk about depression, talk about stress, talking about anxiety. Everything has to be up. Everything has to be good. Everything has to be great, because you don't want to be, the person who rains on people's parade with your sad story, your sob stories. But and what if you're a person who don't like pity parties too? A lot of times, when you don't take initiative to express yourself or express how you feel to the right folks, you can also cause self-harm too by doing that, by keeping your thoughts trapped to you and brewing over your own thoughts that are dark, that needs to be escaped. Guys, I would be lying if I didn't say that coping with the mental and emotional toll of CKD is a significant part of the journey. The experience, man, it goes far beyond the physical symptoms. It impacts a person's sense of self, their relationships, and their outlook on life. So, don't take it from me. I literally connected with about like 20, I think it was about 19 to 20 folks. And I just wanted to get their perspective of their battle on the mental health side of CKD. And these are some of the things that they had to say. So let's jump off. Here's the first one, right? This person says, I feel like I'm grieving the life that I used to have. And it's a type of loss that no one really talks about. You hear me from the previous podcast episodes, how much I grieve the life that I used to love. And one thing I would say to that is, for me, it's almost like I got a reset button for a new life. But it's navigating a new life knowing that I worked so hard on the last one to reach a certain level. So I do grieve that. Even though I love where I'm at now, I appreciate where I'm at now, I do grieve the life that I lost. Another one says, the anxiety of waiting for lab results is a special kind of torture. Every test feels like a final exam for my life. Oh my gosh, yes. Especially trying to keep your doctors happy when they want to see those numbers. And for me, I'll be honest, when I do my Quest lab results and they come in and those specific numbers, those specific categories are all red, like I be having like 6 red numbers and it's like, oh gosh, here's the decline. It's still happening. So I get that, Another one that says, I struggle with survival's guilt because I received a transplant and others are still waiting. It's a heavy burden. Can I say I sympathize with this because of the fact that I know a lot of folks who are on dialysis or folks who have been waiting to receive a living or deceased donor. And I pitched it out there. And I couldn't help it. I didn't know where it was going to come from. I didn't know who. It was, a little waiting game. I put it out there, and then we had folks who came forward and said, hey, I want to try to help out with donating a kidney. When I heard that, I was overjoyed, and you had folks who said they were going to do the testing. You had someone who did all the testing and is approved now. So for me, it's a prospect of getting a living donor. But then I look back at the ones who have been waiting for years, 20 years, 18 years, 10 years, waiting for a donor to come in. They still don't have it yet. And for me, sometimes that produces a sense of guilt, like, man, who am I to have received this? Like, compared to these folks who also have family members, who also have kids, who are also fighting. It does produce that guilt. So I get that heavy. Here's another one. It's hard to make plans because my energy levels and symptoms are so unpredictable. I often cancel at the last minute and it makes me feel like a bad friend. There was a guest that I had on my show one time. Shout out to Mrs. Slack or Mama Slack. Her daughter out in San Diego, struggling heavy with a chronic illness. And a lot of times, you hear stories where she cancels out on friends, because her what she's going through is so heavy and it's causing her, to not feel well. Whether she's throwing up or, she's just not feeling good. And I'm pretty sure that probably resonates with her a lot more because, it would have made her feel like a bad friend because her friends had these great plans to do X, Y, and Z, but here she is flaking out. And it's not her fault. Another one says, I feel so isolated. Even when I'm in a room full of people, they can't possibly understand the constant background noises of this illness. And when you have CKD, your mind is busy. If it's not busy thinking positive thoughts, if it's just aimlessly thinking, guys, it's a dark room to be in. Here's another one. This disease has changed my relationship with my body. I used to trust it, and now it feels like I'm a stranger, or it feels like even an enemy. I feel like a burden on my family and friends, especially with all the appointments and special needs. Honestly, I that one right there hits too, because if I can be honest, all of these appointments, all of these different needs, I need cranberry juice for the renal stent so that, the UTIs, and then I need to watch my potassium, so no bananas at times, I can't really drink orange juice even though I love orange juice so much. I have to limit my protein intake because I don't want to damage my kidneys, all of these things, and me being Caribbean, guys, there's certain delicacies that I miss. Oh my gosh. Oh, you guys just don't understand. Our cuisine, I'm gonna be braggadocious a little bit, top tier. But there's certain things I have to pull back from because of my special needs. How hurtful it is to go to parties and they'd be like, hey, can he eat this? Can he eat that? Did you guys eat yet? Are you eating anything? It's those things, and it puts you such in an awkward moment or awkward space. And you just, I get that one for sure. Here's another one. It's emotionally exhausting to be consistently advocating for myself to doctors and insurance companies. Sometimes I just want to give up. Guys, this is so true. Recently, I got a call. I reached out to some folks and let them know, hey, look, do you have any time frame for when my case is going to be presented to the board? And they're telling me, 20, your GFR has to be 20 or lower before we can do that. And I'm hovering, literally, my baseline is 24 to 30. And they say it's stable, which is a good thing. Stable, but it has to be below that 20. And I had to explain to them, like my urologist said, should I take out the stent that's keeping it afloat in the 20s? I'm going to drop right back down to that stage 5. Can you take that to consideration? This is me advocating for myself, trying to see if I can push forward the process to get my case approved by the board. But because the GFR is stable, we're going to keep it right here and just monitor it. And I felt so defeated. Because this is one of the biggest times where I felt like I really tried to push and advocate for myself, but I had just had to follow protocol, which is okay. And I think there's a silver lining within that. But I think for me, it was truly disheartening because everything is right there. But then what's the rush, right? I just have to make sure that I'm ready for when that time comes, Another one. Every day is a negotiation with myself. How much I can do today before my body gives out. If you guys don't know anything about the spoon theory, I want you guys to look up the spoon theory and see what that's all about. I feel the immense pressure to be positive and strong all the time, but some days I just want to fall apart. I think you can raise your hand to see if you guys can agree with that one. We're always supposed to be positive and strong, and we got this. And in reality, that's not realistic. It's okay to fall apart, but it's where you and who you fall apart to. I have to consciously work to not let this disease define me. I'm a person who has CKD, not just a CKD patient. Guys, you know how hard it is? Even when creating the moniker Mr. Cool Beans, I had the whole idea, because when you say you have a disease that's chronic, people think of, you being feeble and you can't walk, you're weak, you're in a hospital all the time. While that can be true, I'm not taking away from that. They just have this idea of what your disease is supposed to look like, and so we tend to want to challenge that, which is normal, right? We can lead a very great life just by living and existing in our own skin. But then every day it's something that we have to work at, and not let this disease define us. And it is hard. It's not easy at all. Then you have the fear of the future, the future of, dialysis, of a transplant not working, of finding a donor. That somebody said that's a constant shadow. Someone also says, I'm not a hypochondriac, Every ache and pain is a real worry that something is wrong with my kidneys. Yeah, that's one right there. Because there are times where I feel certain pains in my lower back, and especially on my left side, I usually feel like some sharp little stabbing feelings in my lower left side where the kidney ruptured, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? And I'm just like super still trying to pay attention to what's going on. Again, we're not hypochondriacs, but we pay attention to our bodies now. You have a few more. You got my biggest fear is losing my independence. It's a slow, terrifying process that feels out of my control. Another one says, I get a lot of unsolicited advice from people who don't understand my condition. It's frustrating and emotionally draining to consistently educate others. That's a whole podcast episode right there. But we're going to leave that one alone, that unsolicited advice. We're going to leave that alone. Here's another one. Sometimes my brain feels foggy, and it's not because I'm tired. It's a symptom of the disease, and it's incredibly frustrating. Another one says, there's a deep sadness that comes with watching others live their lives without disease restrictions, like eating whatever they want or traveling freely. You know what I'll say to that? And I think in the future, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a guest on here, probably like a renal dietitian, just to kind of address that issue, because I found out there's some research going on that a lot of those little one sheet things are outdated. And again, I am not giving any medical advice. I'm just saying this is what I'm researching. This is what I'm seeing. All right, they're allegedly they're saying that those one sheet papers that the renal dietitians used to give you, they're kind of outdated, and a lot of the restrictions for certain folks with CKD are not necessary, allegedly. All right, maybe I just need to get a renal dietitian on here to address this issue right here. So hold me to that. All right, we got 3 more here. Somebody says, I've had to learn to set boundaries and say no to things to protect my health and my peace, and it often comes with a side of guilt. Oh yeah, that's definitely true. Here's another one. Finding a therapist who truly understands chronic illness has been a game changer. They get it. It's not all in my head. And that's what I was talking about when I sat down with that, transplant psychologist. I felt like he understood me. For the first time, I linked with somebody who knew where I was coming from. And maybe because he has experience with a whole bunch of other patients who had chronic illness or CKD. But it felt so great. I felt so grateful because of that. And here's the last one. This experience has forced me to find a new kind of strength I never knew I had. It's a mix of sadness and profound resilience. And that's my story as far as Mr. Cool Beans, that last one right there. With this whole experience, it literally forced me to step out my comfort zone and to learn. Like, for example, like I was a classroom teacher, and I'm just like, what am I going to do with this degree that I went to school for? And I took 4 years out of my life to earn, and to do 7 years of that, teaching kids math and science and all that stuff. What can I do with this now? Here I am now trying to be an educator on chronic kidney disease, and learning about other chronic illnesses, and connected with other chronic kidney disease patients and other folks who have chronic illnesses. It forced me to pull the strength that I need, to find resilience. And is there times that I'm sad? Yes, because I know that everything that I'm doing now, the shadow of my past life of what I used to do is right there. So sometimes I'm sad, but then it still gives me the resilience to continue to move forward. Yeah, all of these are coming from folks who fight and have a battle with chronic illness or CKD specific. Peeps, I'm not even going to lie. I think today's episode is going to cause me to really look in the mirror and ask myself the deep questions based on all the things that I've learned about Suicide Prevention Month and just the risks that come with having a chronic illness, CKD specific. When I look in the mirror, I got to ask myself, do I really need the help that I think I actually need? And I'll be the first one to admit that I do. There are times where I'm super positive and I'll be encouraging and I'll make random funny videos on Instagram and be educational about it. But I think there's a side of me that really needs healing and really needs the mental health support. I'll be the first one to admit that. Now, while there's so many things that I shared that might have been leaning more on the negative side of things, I'd have to admit that there are some really positive things that I've learned with my battle with CKD, all a year and a half of it, like a year and 3/4 of it now, right? But yeah, there's some things that I've learned, and I'll keep it simple. I'll give you 5, right? One of the things that I've learned is that I've learned what it truly I learned what truly matters in life. Yeah, I've learned what truly matters in life. Battling CKD often forces you to reevaluate or prioritize things. Many people find, they no longer sweat the small stuff, and instead they cherish time with loved ones, appreciate simple pleasures, and focus on meaningful moments over material possessions. Like me right now, I just love to spend time. If I can just watch a good movie with my son and my wife, or if we can just go hang out and go, I want to do picnics. I want to get back to picnics. I want to go. Now go walking on trails. I try not to sweat the small stuff, and I haven't perfectly arrived there. I'll be honest, but I think it's an upward progression towards that. You know. So again, I've learned what truly matters in life. Another thing that I've learned is that, well, one thing that I found rather is I found a new kind of inner strength. The daily grind of managing chronic illness, it does build incredible resilience. Like I gotta wake up, I gotta take my meds, and I gotta be mindful of how much I drink for today. I gotta make sure that I'm watching my energy levels. Don't go out in the yard, even though you like to landscape and cut your grass and all that stuff. Don't burn yourself out. Many people say they've discovered, a mental and emotional fortitude that they never knew that they had, turning them into advocates for their own health and powerful survivors. I think for me that speaks volumes because I get inboxes from folks all the time who tell me how much of a great job that I'm doing, and for me I think I'm not making that much of an impact, but they tell me how my vulnerability speaks volumes, and they'll say stuff like, we need more people like you to fill the void, thank you for and I'm just like, wow, okay, so this CKD, while I thought it was a bane of my existence, it's literally a superpower. So that's one thing that I've found, and another thing that I've come to realize is that my relationships have deepened. It truly have deepened. I think talking about that vulnerability, that need for support that come with CKD can bring families and friends closer. When I think when patients often find that people who show up for them, whether it's driving them to appointments or offering a listening ear or cracking jokes with them or inviting them to parties, it becomes a profound and essential source of love and connection. And I'll be honest, I think one thing that I've realized now is that I need to build on friendships. Because even here, yes, I have, again, I have my wife, but I think we, and I say we, my wife and I, because my wife, she's actually she's the main character. As a character, she's the main character. If I'm on this podcast talking my life away, it's all because of her strength too. So I think when I see folks who come around and they show up for us, and I say us because me and my wife, we and my kid, we move as a unit. We appreciate that. I think our relationships have also deepened with other people. So that's one thing else I found too. Another thing is I've become more of a compassionate person. I didn't say I was the most compassionate person. I think I've become more of a compassionate person. Things that I would really get upset about now, I try my best to control myself because, mind you, this thing can cause me to be in a very moody place. But I think experiencing chronic illness, it does provide a unique understanding of what others might be going through. Being that ear of understanding, I think you have to remember that a lot of the struggles aren't invincible. They are truly invisible. But I will say this, the shared experience often leads to a heightened sense of empathy. And trust me, I'm an empath big time. This creates that desire to help others facing similar challenges. Like, I can't wait till I run into the person who's just diagnosed with CKD so I can be like, hey, look, this is how I did it, or this is how you navigate it. Find this doctor, find this specialist. You need this dietitian. Look up, here's these resources. Go at it, go crazy with it because you need to live. Another thing too, it's a second chance at life. Like I said, I am thankful for CKD because one thing my dad always says is that you got to be thankful because a lot of folks, when they get chronic kidney condition, sometimes they don't even make it to the doctor's office, but you did. For those who receive, I think of those who receive a kidney transplant, this experience often is described as a rebirth. the return of energy and freedom from dialysis, I can imagine, it ignites a profound appreciation for life. Sometimes people, they get the kidney transplant and they go run marathons. They get fit. They get super jacked. They work out. They travel. They pursue goals. They feel like they got a chance to live again. So they live life to the fullest. And so, as we wrap up today, let's take a moment to breathe. We looked at some hard numbers and heard the deeply personal stories of a silent battle. The reality of living with chronic illness, CKD, is a constant challenge. There are days when the weight feels unbearable, when your body feels like a stranger and your mind is lost in a fog of fear and frustration. But as we heard today, that's not the end of the story. The same struggle that threatened to break you is also forging an incredible inner strength. The very illness that isolates you can also bring you closer to the people who truly matter. This fight has a way of stripping away what doesn't matter and showing you exactly what does. Every moment of peace, every small joy, every person who stands by your side. Your life is not defined by your illness. You are not a diagnosis. You are a fighter, a survivor, a person who has found courage in the face of immense difficulty. No matter where you are in this battle, no matter what your numbers say, remember that you are not alone. There are voices out there, just like yours, and a community ready to stand with you. Guys, let's do our best to talk to one another, to reach out to one another, to care for one another, especially this December when it's Suicide Prevention Month. We don't know who needs a hug. We don't know who needs to hear that they matter. So let's do our best and reach out to each other. This has been another episode of the Brew Podcast. I am your host, Mr. Cool Beans. I will catch you on the next one. Peace out, peeps. Love y'all.